Hello and welcome to Leadership is a Philosophy, Not a Checklist video discussion 13 on the movie Platoon, made by Oliver Stone. Obviously starring Charlie Sheen, Willem Dafoe, Tom Berenger. So this movie is interesting because I remember watching it before I joined the Army several years ago. And so it had been out for a couple of months, I think. I remember watching it maybe in the spring. And at the time, I had only read a couple of books about Vietnam, and I was young and idealistic and thought that it was complete fiction. And I thought that there was no way that the Army could allow leadership like that to exist. And then I joined the Army and kept going through it, and it seemed like every time I rewatched it, I probably watched the movie 10, 15 times by now. I would go, oh, wow, yep, I remember seeing that, and oh, I've seen this, and oh, I've seen that. So to me, it's the greatest example of there's two leaders in there. So basically the movie focuses on Barnes and Elias. And both of them clearly have the leadership talent because they're able to solve chaotic problems and chaotic situations. One of them has completely corrupted and bad character, and the other one has good character. Or of the four things we talk about, humility, integrity, empathy, and vigilance, they've got the positive of that is with Elias, and the negatives of that are with Barnes, because neither one of them are great human beings if you watch the movie. And so I thought that this was sort of a great way to end. This is the last video of my plan for the first year, 2020 to 2021. So the next things going forward are going to be next year's plan. So it's kind of cool to have a little milestone put in there. So I hope you enjoyed the analysis. It's very interesting and insightful, and also to me it was sort of the indicator of now that we've got all this stuff thought through and analyzed, go back and watch things that you thought were or were not leadership movies, leadership books, and apply it, because suddenly it all falls into place. My main goal with this whole project has been to try to break the hypothesis, try to find a flaw in what I was talking about. And I don't know that we've found a significant flaw. I think it's sort of evident, which means it's not mine. It's that the characteristics of leaders have been the same for thousands of years. And so this is just another example of that. So the movies for the next plan, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. Next year's plan is going to be more book and video reviews applying this, because I really, if you happen to watch this and would love to have a discussion, I would love to have a discussion. I would love to make sure that I'm wrong, because I'm not that smart. There's no possible way that I figured this out, because I'm not that smart. I do crayon a lot and a lot of pictures. Anyway, enough of that. So off to the video. And as always, I appreciate your time and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Alrighty, so welcome to Leadership is a Philosophy, Not a Checklist discussion on Platoon. Now, what I've found really fascinating about this movie, and I talked about it during the intro a little bit, is I saw this when I was 18 or 17, turning 18, and already coming into the Army. So I saw this a month or two before I came in, or 3 months. I don't really remember. And at the time I was young, idealistic, all this sort of stuff, and I thought there's no way that that's true, that that's real, that that's what really happened. Because I had read about the Vietnam War, but and seen some Vietnam War movies, and they were what they were back at that time. So I've watched it several times since then, and just finally was shocked, because I wrote this down. Like I said, this is the final video of my plan for the whole year, new year coming up. And I wrote it down, and I thought, I'll do that. And I had some ideas, and then I went and watched it again, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and just got blown away, because I finally realized that I think that the answer, the philosophy, the hypothesis that we've come up with is is correct, and hopefully I can show that as we go through. I have had a couple times where I've had copyright strikes on my videos, and so I've gone and re-edited them. So no more video clips. I just do pictures that I can find on the internet that are public. You can tell they're press photos because they're everywhere. So I don't want to get dinged for copyright, even though I think it's funny that they're dinging you for copyright when I'm showing respect to the product. Anyway, so summary of the movie. So at the beginning, right, it starts off with Charlie Sheen's character, Chris, and it's sort of like you've read in most places about Vietnam, about how it was kind of chaotic and messy, because he shows up and the next thing he's on a patrol. Hasn't had any training, hasn't had anything going on, has no clue what's happening, and he becomes a heat exhaustion. You know, he's too hot, not enough water, so he passes out. So this is where we get introduced to the two main leadership characters that I'm going to discuss throughout the rest of the video, and that's Sergeant Barnes, played by Tom Sizemore, and no, not Tom Sizemore, Tom Berenger Sizemore, and then Elias, which is played by, why do I forget his name all the time? Anyway, so Sergeant Elias. So Sergeant Barnes comes running down, or not running down, walks by, starts cussing at Chris, yelling at him for being useless and a problem and all this sort of stuff, and then just walks off. So then the other guy comes down, Sergeant Elias, and Sergeant Elias checks on him and starts going through his backpack and says, "You're carrying too much crap. You got too much stuff. There's a problem. You know, what are you thinking?" And then he goes, "Look, I'll carry it for you this time, but in the future, don't come so light." So what do you have right there? You get the introduction to two different types of leader. You get the one that's a pain in the neck, and then you got the one that's trying to be helpful. So fast forward to a little bit later, they're on a patrol base and they're getting ready to move out. And this is when we get introduced to really the dynamics that are going on in the organization. So they're supposed to go out and do an ambush. And you've got the lieutenant, who's the highest ranking member in the platoon. And then you've got Sergeant Barnes, who is the platoon sergeant. So he's the senior enlisted guy. And then you got Sergeant Elias. And then there's a couple other sergeants that are there as well. Well, right away you find out the lieutenant comes up and says, "Here's the mission." Sergeant Barnes basically takes over. Here's who's going to do the ambush. Here's who's doing this. Here's who's going to go. Sergeant Elias argues with him, says, "I got brand new people. I haven't had a chance to train them." Sergeant Barnes says, "You're going out." And then you can tell that he's got people that are his favorites, his sycophants. And so they end up getting ready to go and do the mission. Before they move out on the mission, again, we get to see Sergeant Elias's character and his leadership ability, because he gets the two new guys and says, "Look, here's what we're doing. If you get lost, don't yell. We'll come find you. Just pay attention. Do what you're supposed to do." And then Sergeant Barnes is just yelling at people. So as they go out and do the ambush, somebody falls asleep, and again, there's a mistake made. Sergeant Barnes yelling and screaming, and Sergeant Elias knows that somebody fell asleep on the job, and he knows somebody did the right thing, but the person that he knows did it is on Sergeant Barnes' favorites list. So what do we have there? Well, if you think about it in two different ways, you've got Sergeant Barnes, powerful, competent, and he has all of the negative characteristics. He doesn't have humility, doesn't have integrity, doesn't have empathy, pays attention, right? So he's got the talent and poor characteristics, and has a group of people that are following him. And then you've got Sergeant Elias, who has empathy. He's got humility, he's got integrity, he's got empathy, and he's paying attention. And he has a leadership talent. So you have two parts of two typical leaders. Same training, both have combat experience, both have all these sort of things. One of them has the leadership talent and good character. The other one has the leadership talent and bad character. And so the people that are following the guy with the bad character, Sergeant Barnes, their competency is not because they're the best, it's because they're the best suck-up. So they're rewarded for the competency of being a suck-up. and the guys that are under Sergeant Elias are good and happen to be good at their job and all this sort of stuff. So you say, well, what does that have to do with anything in the civilian world? I've seen it everywhere, right? Something I found amazing about this thing is, good stories, really good fiction, is they're great because they're meta truths. So in other words, they're sort of a compilation of examples that are true, and so it ends up being more powerful. And if you go watch Oliver Stone, he said he served in with four different units in Vietnam and wrote these characters, put them all in one platoon, but he had met all of these people, basically. So unbelievably amazing, right? So fast forward through the movie, and this is where I'm going to talk about the impact of leadership and how terrible things can actually get, right? So they go through this bunker complex, they're doing all their normal things, and one of the soldiers gets caught by the North Vietnamese, tied to a tree, throat slit, bleeds to death. It's terrible. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. So they say, hey, you got to move down to we got to move to this village. And I kind of laughed watching it because one person says the village is 500 meters down the way. Another one says it's a kilometer away. It's technical details. I pay attention to that sort of information for artillery purposes. Anyway, they go to the village. So they go in and everybody's mad. Everybody's upset that this guy got killed. And so Sergeant Barnes is on the warpath. Now, this is where things get bad, right? If you go and watch this, like I said, I thought it was impossible. I thought it was fantasy. I thought it was fiction. And then you read about My Lai, and what they show in the movie is 1/100% of what happened in My Lai. Anyway, they walk in, and Sergeant Barnes just rip this apart, tear that apart, get the chief. What are all these weapons for? And then a couple of soldiers go into a room, and Chris, the guy played by Charlie Sheen, goes walking in and gets mad because he finds a guy that's basically got eye problems and he's handicapped or whatever. He starts shooting at his feet and doing all this crazy stuff, and because he's enraged and he's scared and all the terrible things that can happen to soldiers, right? There's another soldier there that hits the kid in the face with his rifle and then bludgeons him to death. And so the problem is this happens. This guy just committed a murder, and one of the sergeants that is on Sergeant Barnes' team is standing there and lets it all happen. Doesn't do anything. He's the highest ranking guy in the room and doesn't stop anything. And then his first thing is, hey, let's get out of here now, and nobody saw anything. So his first instinct is, one, not to do anything, and then two, to cover it up. This is the guy that works for Sergeant Barnes. So then they come out, and at the same time that's going on, they're killing the livestock and they're doing all this stuff. Well, Sergeant Barnes is trying to get some information out of the chief of the village. Turns out the previous chief got killed by the NVA. He's threatening this guy's life. His wife comes up trying to stop it. Sergeant Barnes shoots her in the head, kills her dead. Okay, once again, the lieutenant, this is in the picture, the lieutenant's standing there and watches the whole thing happen. He's not in control either. And so then, right after that happens, he's got his pistol to the guy, the chief's granddaughter or daughter, and is threatening to kill her if the chief doesn't talk. And suddenly Willem Dafoe's character, Sergeant Elias comes in and yells at Barnes, and next thing you know, this big fight breaks out. And they're fighting because Elias is just losing his mind. So this picture right here is an aftermath of that. So what you have here is a really great picture. So here's Sergeant Elias and Sergeant Barnes that had the fight. This is the sergeant that is on his team and is weak. And the lieutenant is obviously coward and feckless and terrible. And he says, I didn't see anything. I don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here, blah, blah, blah. And is trying to shoo Sergeant Elias away. Well, here's the problem. So I forget this sergeant's name in the movie. Anyway, Sergeant Barnes and this sergeant and the lieutenant have all been to the Army schools. They've all had training. They've all ostensibly, theoretically had training on ethics and integrity and all this other sort of stuff. And the only person that's doing it right is Sergeant Elias. So the lieutenant knows better, but he's so weak that he's fallen in line because he knows that the powerful guy is going to cover it up. This guy's going to cover it up. So he knows that the preponderance of people are going to lie. So now he's on the side of the liars because he's so weak that he gravitates to this leader. Now, the other half of the platoon that knows it's wrong is falling in line behind Sergeant Elias. And so what happens, right? Because you've got no unity in the leadership, you have a lieutenant in charge, a person in charge, it doesn't matter. A person in charge who doesn't have any moral courage, has no integrity, right? Doesn't have any of the good characteristics or has the weakest version of them and no leadership talent put in charge. This division is allowed to happen. And then because of that, I don't know if I've said it before in one of these videos. It's a couple of discussions I've had. The line between good and evil goes through everybody's heart. We talked about that before. So if you have people that are making a bunch of bad decisions, then they attract people that make bad decisions. If you have somebody that's making a bunch of good decisions, they're going to attract good decisions. Well, the leadership environment in this platoon is terrible. It's catastrophic because you've got somebody who's doing the right thing and the person in charge is not. So then what happens? Well, then it's chaos and it's everybody for themselves and everybody goes into survival mode. Everybody goes into trying to, protect their own interests. And so that's how bad it gets. Because then you've got some of the other sergeants that are in there that are junior that should be making good decisions, but they're all kind of weak too, so they're just doing whatever above them is told. And that's why it has to be done right. That's why it has to be done right. That's why you have to have somebody in here and they have to know that the consequence of lying or doing the wrong thing is that they must take action and correct it. Right? The fact that somebody who's junior has to come in and tell this guy to stop and start the big fight and all this sort of stuff, it's a problem. Right? And what happens here is that, as I said before, the competence and environmental hierarchies, right? Sergeant Elias, he has people that work for him that are good. They're good soldiers. They're good fighters. They're good this. And so that's the reason that they're attracted to him. The people that are attracted to and work with or working for Sergeant Barnes, their competency is that they are ass kissers, for lack of a better term, or a more appropriate term. And so then because nobody asks any questions or says anything bad, then you get somebody else who's weak, who has to figure out who to go with. Right? So it's hard to do the right thing. Sergeant Elias still does the right thing. It's real easy to do the wrong thing. And this happens in organizations all the time. Just think about all the catastrophic business examples we've seen where terrible things have happened, right? Everybody wears sycophants instead of somebody standing up and saying the right thing, or the whistleblower gets thrown out. So after that, the next scene is them talking to the company commander. So he's a captain, and Sergeant Elias is trying to do a report, and Sergeant Barnes is saying, I've got all sorts of witnesses saying nothing happened, including the lieutenant, right? Now, the company commander says, if I find out that there was an illegal killing, I'm going to court-martial somebody. Okay, so company commander had the right idea. The captain had the right idea. But Barnes basically is threatening to kill Elias. And then if you watch the movie, that's what happens, right? And then everybody knows that it happened because they know that that's what this guy is capable of. And so this is just a fantastic example. Both of these guys, you watch the movie, both of these guys are steely-eyed killers of men, right? They're both amazing soldiers. They both had the same training, same experience, same all this sort of stuff. Just one of them has the good characteristics of a leader, Sergeant Elias, Willem Dafoe, and the other one's got all the bad characteristics of a leader. Right? But the talent. And so that's the problem, right? We talked about that veiled in other videos. But what happens if you have somebody who's got the leadership talent and bad character? Terrible things are going to happen, right? And so, yeah, so you've got all that sort of stuff happens. And then, you know, at the end of the movie goes on and big, nasty, crazy fight happens and all that stuff. But this movie might have been fiction, but it's absolutely true. Because I've seen it happen all over the place, military and civilian. So that's why it has to be done right. That's why you have to evaluate somebody. That's why you have to put somebody in charge and see how they're going to act. That's why you got to do a bunch of wisdom training. That's why you have to tell them that that's the expectation. Because here's what happens. If the expectation is that you're going to tell the truth no matter what, then people that are tempted to do wrong out of fear of getting caught are going to stop. Or that's going to be the thing that stops them. Is, oh man, I'm going to get told on if this happens. And so that's what you have to have. That's the sort of environment that you have to have. And the more stressful the environment, the more you have to have better leadership. And so, you know, it's not just get somebody with some certificates, because all these people have the same certificates. All these people have the same training. All of these people have been through the same stuff. The difference is good character, or bad characteristics, or, you know, whatever you want to call it. So that's the thing. And that's why I just think this is so amazing, because I've always liked this movie, and now I'm watching it, understanding that this is probably, you know, Oliver Stone. I don't even know if he meant to write it that way, but making the movie like this, characterizing these leaders this way, you can absolutely see the flaws in the system. All right, so quick wrap up. So Elias Resparn, same training, same talent, different character. And then you end up with that whole thing, right? Instead of the competency is how big of a suck-up are you, instead of how good are you. Corrupted environment causes chaos. And so how do you check on the environment and organizations? Well, you got to pay attention. You got to have vigilance. You got to do all this sort of stuff. The company commander sort of says, I know something terrible happened, but we're about to have this big attack. I don't have time to do this right now. Well, I don't know. It's almost like you should have stopped. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is in combat, right? When you know that something terrible's happened, do you stop immediately because that's going to hang over everybody's head? I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, in the case of what they did with My Lai, they didn't talk about it for a year. You know, and then that's corrupting other people's souls. What I found also very interesting was after this killing, or these two killings happened, they showed some of the soldiers and they're saying, oh man, my spirit's killing me. So it's like everybody knows when you've done wrong. And at least if you go and report it, then it's, well, we did wrong, but we're telling the right story. Anyway, I babble. But well worth watching for that leadership perspective. And the fact that I've gone and read some books now about Vietnam that I didn't read when I was a kid, and this movie is way more true and way more real in the themes than I thought when I was 18 and idealistic. Anyway, great movie, great leadership example, and just a perfect example of what we're talking about, and not written. I'm sure it was not written for this episode, right? Is that it? I think that's it. Yep. So here's the movie. Go watch the movie. It's great. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you have. Yeah, it came out in December of '86, and that's why I can't remember. I think I might have watched it in January or February. I don't know. So long ago. I just know I watched it right before I came in. And then the funny part is I watched Full Metal Jacket when I got out of basic training. So that was fun. Anyway, as always, thank you for your time. I really appreciate those of you that have paid attention for this long, and I hope you have a great day.